Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Welcome. If you're joining us today, you are probably someone who loves to learn. Someone who is just kind of insanely curious about human behavior and who really wants to navigate this chaotic, loud world just a little bit better.
Right, and ideally without having to drown in dense academic psychology textbooks to do it.
Exactly, without the textbooks. So if that sounds like you, you are exactly who this deep dive is custom tailored for. Because today we are taking a massive magnifying glass to the actual mechanics of human connection. We're decoding the fine art of conflict and communication.
Which is, that's a mission we can all get behind. Communication is pretty much the foundation of absolutely everything we do. It dictates the quality of our relationships, our careers, our internal peace, and yet
it is so frequently the source of our absolute greatest, most baffling frustration.
Yeah, it really is.
So our goal today is to equip you, the listener, with practical, real-world tools. We want it so that your very next conversation, especially those difficult, palm-sweating, heart-racing ones, doesn't end in a disaster, but actually ends in true connection.
And we are pulling all of our insights today from a really fantastic piece of source material. It's called The Next Conversation, Argue Less, Talk More, by Jefferson Fisher.
Yes, and let me set the stage with who this author is, because his background is entirely unexpected. When you hear the phrase communication expert, you might picture, a therapist with a soothing, hypnotic voice sitting on a plush velvet couch.
Right, the classic clinical setting.
Yeah, exactly. But Fisher, he is a Texas trial lawyer. He comes from a long, proud, loud line of trial lawyers. He actually tells this amazing story about going to a hunting lodge in the hill country of West Texas as a kid.
The Spider-Man underwear story?
Yes. He's running around in his Spider-Man underwear, looking up at all these towering men, and he suddenly realizes he is the 14th fisherman at this gathering of legal minds. It was a family where advocacy through really intense storytelling was practically a genetic trait.
Which sets up a really fascinating paradox if you think about it. You would assume a lineage of trial lawyers would make him an absolute master of tearing people down on the stand.
Oh, for sure. You'd think he'd be ruthless.
But he is very clear that he did not learn human communication in law school. Because, law school teaches you how to read the law, right? Contracts, torts, complex constitutional principles.
It teaches you how to dissect a statute.
Exactly. It absolutely does not teach you how to read people. It doesn't teach you empathy. And it certainly doesn't teach you how to de-escalate a heated argument when someone is just screaming in your face.
So if he didn't learn it in a courtroom or a lecture hall, where did he learn it? Well, he says he actually built his foundation mediating fights between his younger siblings, Sarah, Jonathan, and Jacob.
The real boot camp.
The ultimate boot camp. He was the oldest of four, kind of the classic mother hen, and he had to learn how to tailor his communication to each distinct, stubborn personality. He figured out early on that his sister responded better to gentle kindness, while his brother Jonathan needed patient, uninterrupted listening before he would calm down.
And then his youngest brother, Jacob, needed him to literally slow down his physical movements and drop his voice to a whisper. So that messy, chaotic living room was where he actually learned his craft.
And that practical homegrown foundation is exactly what led to his viral rise, which is a great story in itself because it proves just how universally hungry we are for this exact kind of advice.
Oh, absolutely. The context of how this all exploded for him is so relatable.
Set the scene for us on that. How did it happen?
So it's 2022. He's a partner at a prestigious defense firm, making great money, checking all the traditional boxes of success, but he feels professionally depressed. He describes the feeling as trying to run a sprint while dragging a parachute behind him.
Oof, that's a heavy visual.
Yeah. The work just wasn't fulfilling the human side of him. So he takes a massive leap. He starts his own personal injury firm, working out of coffee shops. And on a whim, he decides to make a social media post, giving some practical communication advice.
And he doesn't rent a fancy studio for this, right?
No, not at all. He doesn't hire a lighting crew or write a polished script. It's literally just him sitting in the front seat of his truck. You can see his kids' car seats in the back, including this bright pink one for his daughter. And he records a raw 47-second video on how to argue like a lawyer.
And it just completely exploded. Millions of views almost overnight. People were starving for real, grounded communication advice from someone who wasn't trying to sell them a flashy 10-step gimmick.
Which really brings us to the core premise of our deep dive today. We have all been sold a massive lie.
A huge lie. Society, social media algorithms, our culture, they all tell us that conversations, especially disagreements, are battles that need to be won.
That is the grand illusion. We are deeply conditioned from childhood to view conflict as a zero-sum game. You're either the victor standing over the vanquished, or you are the loser licking your wounds.
You see it everywhere. In the blood sport of political debates, in the toxic comment sections online, even in how we talk to our spouses over who forgot to load the dishwasher.
But the truth is, viewing a conversation as a battle is a fundamentally flawed, self-destructive approach. Winning an argument is actually a losing game.
Wait, let me push back on that a little bit. On behalf of anyone listening who might be in a highly competitive field, what if I am objectively right?
Okay, fair.
Like, what if a coworker is pushing a terrible financial decision that will tank our department's budget? Do I need to win that argument to save the project? Isn't that what lawyers are quite literally paid to do?
It's a completely fair question. But we have to separate the concept of persuading someone from the concept of dominating them. The stereotype of the argumentative lawyer who just wants to beat the other person into submission with facts and cold logic, it's actually a terrible strategy in the real world.
How so?
Well, Fisher points out that trial attorneys don't get to choose the facts of their case. They don't get to choose the law. Their job is simply to give those facts a voice. Winning an argument in that traditional sense, shutting someone down, making them look foolish, proving your intellectual dominance, it usually only wins you the other person's contempt.
Wow. Contempt, that's a heavy word.
Because it's true. Think about it. You might end the immediate argument, you might stop the terrible financial decision, but what have you really gained long term? You still have to work with that coworker, you still have to live with that spouse. If you force them into submission, they will resent you.
They'll just wait for their next chance to get back at you.
Exactly. If we look back at the ancient Greeks, they utilized the Socratic method. They didn't debate to shut people down or go viral with a mic drop moment. They engaged in intense dialogue to refine the truth together. It was a collaborative vehicle for exploring divisive issues, not a weapon for personal ego-driven victory.
So Fisher actually learned this the hard way in a deposition with a guy named Bobby Lepre. Can you walk us through what exactly happened in that room? Because this story completely changes how you look at the people you're arguing with.
Yeah, this is a powerful one. Picture a formal, sterile, antique conference room. There's a court reporter tapping away, an older, nervous opposing attorney, and then the witness, Bobby Lepre. Bobby is a giant of a man.
Physically imposing.
Very. He walks in wearing these heavy tan coveralls with his name embroidered on the pocket, and his handshake is like a steel vice grip. He is incredibly physically intimidating, and he is hostile from the very second he crosses the threshold.
He's furrowing his brow. He's breathing heavily, loudly exhaling through his mouth, wringing these massive calloused hands. Fisher's just trying to ask him simple, routine, open-ended questions about a bar fight, just trying to build a basic timeline for the case.
But the tension in the room is building and building, like a balloon that's being overinflated. Finally, Bobby just detonates.
He slams his massive hand on the antique table, points a thick finger right at Fisher's face, and yells, "You lawyers are the worst thing to happen to America. All you do is lie. I don't trust you as far as I can throw you."
Now, put yourself in Fisher's shoes. How does your body react when a giant man screams in your face and insults your entire profession? Fisher's immediate biological reaction was intense anger. He felt his body tense up like a coiled spring. His ears got hot.
His ego screamed at him to fight back, to assert his dominance.
Right. He had a biting put-down chambered and ready to go about Bobby's physical size versus his intelligence. He desperately wanted to win that moment.
But he didn't fire the shot. And this is the turning point of the entire source material. Instead of retaliating, Fisher lets 10 full seconds of silence pass. Think about that. 10 seconds of dead air in a tense room where someone just screamed at you.
It feels like an eternity.
It really does. Then he softens his posture, looks Bobby in the eye, and says quietly, "Well, maybe you're right." He waits another 10 seconds, leans forward, and asks, "Tell me, please, what's been your biggest struggle this year?"
It is a masterclass in de-escalation. By completely refusing to take the bait, he short-circuits the hostility, he disrupts the expected power dynamic. Bobby was braced for a fight, and Fisher gave him a vacuum.
And the physical shift in Bobby is immediate. His anger just evaporates. He visibly deflates, gets very still, and looks down. And then this mountain of a man reveals that he had to put his mother in an assisted living facility the month prior.
He's an only child, right?
Yes, he's the only one taking care of her. He is drowning in legal paperwork he doesn't understand, and he's getting aggressive letters from lawyers threatening to foreclose on his mother's house. He felt totally helpless, terrified, and utterly alone.
This is the critical concept we want to extract for you listening right now, the iceberg of human interaction. The person you see isn't the person you're actually talking to. The visual cues, the yelling, the clenched fists, the impatience, the sharp tone are almost always just a protective shell.
They're the tiny tip of the iceberg visible above the water.
Exactly. The real truth, the massive undercurrent driving the behavior, is hidden below the surface. In Bobby's case, the anger was just a mask for profound fear and isolation.
Fisher looks at him and says, "You're a good son." And Bobby breaks down crying. Fisher actually pauses the deposition, sits with him for 20 minutes, and helps him find a local elder law attorney to protect his mother's house. When the deposition finishes, Bobby gives Fisher a massive bear hug before he leaves.
It completely flips the script.
It does. Think about your own life right now. That agitated coworker who snapped at you in the morning meeting. Maybe they aren't just a jerk. Maybe they were up all night pacing the floor because of a scary medical diagnosis in their family.
Or that tense spouse who walks through the door radiating bad energy. Maybe they had a horrible day at work and feel completely invisible and unappreciated. We are constantly colliding with unseen worlds.
Fisher shares another memory that anchors this beautifully, with Evan, the third-grade reading buddy.
Yeah, when Fisher was in third grade, he was assigned to help an older, bigger kid named Evan who was severely struggling to read. They were working through a book, and they got stuck on the word throw.
And Fisher, trying to be helpful, tried to relate it to Evan's life and said, like throwing a ball to your dad.
And Evan just looked at him with dead eyes and flatly replied, "I don't know who my dad is." Fisher later learned Evan's mom was in jail.
That is a staggering realization for a third grader to process.
It really is. He realized Evan was navigating a dark, complex universe that Fisher knew absolutely nothing about. And that is the fundamental truth we have to carry into every disagreement.
When you argue with someone, you are often colliding with a world you know nothing about. If we can stop seeing arguments as puzzles to solve or battles to win and start seeing them as narrow windows into another person's unseen struggle, our entire approach to communication transforms.
Which forces you to rethink what you're even trying to get out of a conversation in the first place. If winning isn't the point, what is?
Let's paint a hypothetical scenario that I think every single person listening has dreaded at some point. Imagine you get a text from a friend. You two had a massive blowout argument a few weeks ago, haven't spoken since, and the text just says, "I'm ready to talk."
Just reading that text makes your stomach drop.
Right. So you agreed to meet up for lunch at a diner. In your head, on the drive over, you have this whole script prepared. You've directed the entire movie. You expect a tearful apology. You expect them to sit down and admit they were completely out of line.
But instead, you sit down, you tentatively bring up how they hurt you, and they instantly bristle. They get defensive. They accuse you of starting it.
You feel that hot flash of injustice, so you attack back. The whole thing devolves into rapid-fire bickering, and 10 minutes later, the friend violently pushes their chair back, leaves a half-eaten sandwich on the table, and walks out the door.
We have all lived some version of that disaster. We rehearse these conversations in the shower. We mutter to ourselves while driving to work, playing out exactly how we will be vindicated.
How the other person will finally see the light.
Yes. But the reason these rehearsed conversations implode in reality is because our internal goals are wildly unrealistic. We walk into the diner expecting the other person to concede everything, to fall on their sword, and to validate our reality 100%.
But I want them to apologize. If they wronged me, shouldn't my goal be to get them to acknowledge that?
It's totally natural to want that. But relying on it as your primary goal is a trap. If your goal requires the other person to surrender, you will almost always be disappointed, because human beings are biologically wired to protect their egos.
People do not naturally want to concede defeat.
They don't. The monumental shift that Fisher suggests, and this changes everything, is shifting your mindset from having something to prove to having something to learn.
Or proving to learning.
Exactly. If your goal is to learn, to genuinely understand their perspective, that is a goal you have absolute control over, regardless of how they behave.
Let's clearly define the difference for the listener. Unrealistic goals look like hoping for an immediate groveling apology, believing that one single conversation is going to magically cure years of underlying relationship resentment, or expecting them to see the timeline of events exactly from your point of view.
And realistic goals, on the other hand, look like leaving the conversation feeling like you clearly articulated your boundaries, gaining a better understanding of the emotion driving their behavior, or simply agreeing on a mechanical step to avoid this specific issue happening again next Tuesday.
And to anchor yourself to those realistic goals when the tension spikes, you need a compass. This is where Fisher introduces the vital concept of conversational values. Before you ever step foot in that diner, before you ever reply to that dreaded text, you need to answer a fundamental internal question.
How will I show up for myself today?
I love this concept. Fisher shares his personal conversational values as examples, and they are incredibly grounding. He tells himself 3 things. First, where there's room for kindness, I will use it. Second, tell them who I am without saying my name, meaning his character should be obvious by his demeanor alone. And third, my absolute favorite, if I can't be a bridge, I'll be a lighthouse.
Let's unpack that lighthouse metaphor because it is so powerful.
Please do.
A bridge requires 2 solid foundations to connect. Sometimes the other person is so hurt, so angry, or so deeply entrenched in their own trauma that they cannot be the other side of that bridge. They aren't ready to meet you in the middle.
If your goal was to build a bridge, you'd leave the conversation feeling like a failure.
Exactly. But a lighthouse doesn't force a connection. A lighthouse just stands firm on its bedrock. It shines a steady, consistent, safe light. It says, I am here, I am stable, I am not going to attack you, but I'm not going to be moved either. When the storm passes and you're ready to navigate back to safe harbor, you know exactly where to find me.
That takes so much pressure off the immediate moment. Having these values established beforehand means you don't have to agonize over how to respond when they throw a verbal punch. Your values make the hard decisions for you.
Right. If one of your values is honesty and your friend passive-aggressively says, well, whatever, I guess we're good then. As they stand up to leave, you won't just swallow your feelings and say, yeah, we're good, just to keep the fragile peace.
Your value of honesty will kick in and say, I appreciate that you came today, but to be completely honest, I still don't feel fully heard on my end. I'd like to try talking again when we're both ready.
So to you listening, try this out this week. Send a text to 3 trusted friends. Ask them, what are 3 words you'd use to describe my character when I'm at my best? Look for the patterns in their answers.
Maybe the words are loyal, calm, and fair.
Use their feedback to crystallize your own conversational values. Write them down. When the conversation gets stormy, let those values act as your lighthouse.
But even with the best goals and the most solid values, there is a massive pitfall in modern communication that can sabotage everything before you even open your mouth. Because the medium you choose to communicate through can entirely ruin the message.
Which brings us to the crucial distinction between transmission and connection.
Oh man, to illustrate this, Fisher shares this hilarious, highly relatable text exchange with his mom. It's the white Nissan text.
It's so good.
She texts him, completely out of the blue, on a random Tuesday. Do you know how many miles are on the white Nissan? He texts back simply, no ma'am. She pushes back, you don't have any idea what the mileage is. He replies again, no ma'am.
She says, okay, I thought you'd know.
And he finally responds, trying to be clear, Mama, I don't know how else to tell you. I don't know the mileage on the white Nissan. And her final response, that's fine, Jefferson. I just don't like your attitude.
It is brilliant because it highlights exactly what is structurally missing in text-based communication.
Oh, I felt this in my soul. My mom does this exact same thing with emojis. She will send me the solitary thumbs up emoji in response to a long text, and I will spend the next 3 hours agonizing, wondering, is she mad at me? Is that a sarcastic thumbs up? Did I do something wrong?
Meanwhile, she's just at the grocery store thinking she effectively acknowledged your message.
Exactly. Fincher actually had to call his mom immediately to convey his lighthearted tone, to let her hear his laugh, to prove he wasn't being short with her. A completely neutral exchange of data turned into an emotional argument.
Let's break down the underlying mechanics of why that happens. Texting, emailing, direct messaging, this is all transmission. It is the act of sending raw data through a cold, two-dimensional medium.
It's highly efficient for logistics, yes, but it is completely indifferent to authenticity, tone, and emotional nuance.
True connection, on the other hand, requires both understanding and emotional acknowledgement. An emoji, no matter how expressive, cannot replace the warmth of a human smile. the subtle softening of the eyes, or the specific inflection of a human voice.
Transmission is just moving information. Connection is moving emotion. Now, a quick caveat from the source, sometimes disconnection is actually the right choice. Fisher is clear that not everyone deserves your deep connection.
Setting boundaries is wise.
Right. If someone is continuously toxic or abusive, retreating to cold transmission or cutting contact entirely is setting a healthy boundary. But assuming you do want to build connection, you have to actively watch out for what Fisher calls the 3 cuts to connection. These are the invisible ways we inadvertently sever our ability to connect.
Let's explore those. Cut 1 is a lack of awareness. And this actually dips into some fascinating biology regarding how we perceive ourselves versus how the world perceives us.
Yes, the science of bone conduction versus air conduction. If you're listening to this right now, have you ever heard a recording of your own voice on a video or a voicemail and physically cringed? You think, do I really sound that high-pitched? Do I really sound that nasal?
Every single person has experienced that shock. And the reason for it is pure anatomy. When you speak, your vocal cords vibrate. The sound you hear in your own head travels internally, primarily vibrating through the dense bones of your skull directly to your inner ear.
Because bone is thicker than air, it enhances the lower frequencies.
Yes, so your voice sounds deeper, richer, and more resonant to you. But the sound everyone else hears, that sound travels outward through the air, it loses that bass resonance, it sounds thinner and completely different.
Because of this physiological reality, we are woefully unaware of our tone, our pitch, and our volume.
We are also blind to our resting facial expressions. You might feel perfectly calm on the inside, but because of a furrowed brow you don't realize you have, your coworker perceives you as deeply agitated and aggressive.
That profound lack of self-awareness causes so much unnecessary friction. We think we are broadcasting calm, but they are receiving hostile. Then there's cut 2, lack of understanding. This is our ego's tendency to view the entire universe exclusively through our own telescope.
When we encounter a belief or a behavior we don't like, our default setting is to judge it rather than get curious about the perspective behind it. We say, "How could you be so stupid to think that?" Or "What is wrong with you?" Instead of pausing and asking, "Help me understand why you hold that belief. What experiences led you to that conclusion?"
Judgment shuts down the conversation immediately. Curiosity opens it up. And finally, cut 3, lack of self-assurance. This happens when we desire connection so much that we avoid directness out of a deep-seated fear of creating conflict. We dilute our own voices with passive, indirect, apologetic phrases.
You see this in professional emails constantly.
I am so guilty of this. I will type, sorry to bother you, but this is probably a dumb question, but I'm not sure if this makes sense, but we pad our language with so much bubble wrap to protect the other person's feelings that we completely lose our own authority. We make ourselves small.
Which is exactly why redefining confidence is so critical. True confidence in communication is not about achieving perfection. It is not the arrogant absence of fear.
That is such a crucial reframe. Confidence isn't not being afraid. It's being terrified and doing it anyway. It's having the hard conversation while your voice shakes. It prioritizes extending grace to yourself and the other person over delivering a flawless monologue.
It means you have the self-assurance to say, "I was wrong about that," and embrace your missteps without your ego shattering.
It is a powerful foundation. Yep. But here is the terrifying reality. Even if you have built up incredible self-awareness, deep understanding, and solid self-assurance, your own biology can still violently hijack the conversation.
To understand why smart people say terrible things to each other, we have to look at the chemistry of conflict.
The biology of an argument. This is where we examine the 2 phases of conflict, ignition versus cooling. To illustrate this, let's look at the classic bedtime battle.
A very relatable scenario for any parents out there.
Absolutely. Picture this scene in a suburban home. Lily is 3 years old, and she is fighting bedtime like her life depends on it. Dad, John, is the flexible parent. He thinks if she's not tired, she should just play quietly until she drops. Mom, Grace, is the strict parent. Bedtime's 8 p.m. It's a non-negotiable routine.
But here's the invisible context. Grace has been quietly bottling up resentment for 2 weeks because she feels John constantly undermines her authority in front of their daughter.
It gets a pressure cooker waiting for a spark. A classic parenting standoff. So it's 8 p.m. 5 p.m. Lily is whining, "I'm not tired yet." John, trying to do the cool dad, whispers, "Okay, 10 more minutes with the blocks." Grace overhears this from the hallway and completely snaps.
The spark.
She yells at John, "What did I just tell you? She is exhausted. Why do you always do this?" John, feeling attacked, yells back, "She's not a robot, Grace. You have a massive control problem."
Grace unloads 2 weeks of stored resentment, accusing him of never being around to handle the hard stuff. And then John, backed into a corner, hits her with a devastating, unforgivable low blow. What do you want? For her to end up rigid and crazy like your mother? Or lonely like you, with no real friends?
It is genuinely painful to hear, but it perfectly illustrates the autonomic nervous system in full crisis mode. Let's pause and explain the science of what Fisher calls flooding, what is literally happening inside their bodies in that terrible moment.
In every intense argument, there are 2 distinct physiological phases: ignition and cooling. The ignition phase is controlled entirely by your sympathetic nervous system. For our listeners who aren't neuroscientists, think of the amygdala, the almond-shaped mass deep in your brain, as your body's ultimate fire alarm.
When Grace felt her authority being undermined, her brain didn't logically assess the situation and say, minor disagreement on child-rearing philosophies.
No, her amygdala pulled the fire alarm, perceiving a massive threat to her identity. Instantly, her body flooded with epinephrine, which we know as adrenaline.
And the physical symptoms are immediate. Her pupils literally dilate to let in more light, scanning for danger. Her breathing becomes shallow and rapid to pull in more oxygen. Her heart rate skyrockets to pump blood to her major muscle groups in case she needs to literally fight or run away.
But the most devastating biological change for communication is what happens to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the area right behind your forehead. It is responsible for logic, rational thought, empathy, and emotional regulation. It is the adult in the room.
When the amygdala pulls the fire alarm and the body floods with adrenaline, the prefrontal cortex is chemically suppressed. It goes offline.
You literally biologically cannot think straight. You are in a state of flooding. John and Grace are saying horrific things to each other, not because they are evil people, but because their bodies are reacting to a perceived threat, as if a grizzly bear just walked into the nursery.
Which perfectly explains John's devastating low blow about Grace's mother. The adult in his brain was offline. His primal brain was just throwing rocks to survive. But eventually, the ignition phase burns out. The human body physically cannot sustain that extreme level of adrenaline forever. And that exhaustion brings us to the cooling phase.
The cooling phase is governed by the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. Slowly, the heart rate decelerates, the breathing deepens, and critically, the prefrontal cortex boots back up.
And that's exactly when the terrifying clarity sets in. The reflection gives way to crushing regret. You sit on the edge of the bed and think, oh my God, why did I say that? Where did that even come from? How did I let a disagreement about wooden blocks turn into an attack on her mother?
Meanwhile, the argument is over, the damage is done, and 3-year-old Lily is just fast asleep on the rug.
To prevent this destructive cycle, you have to do the hard work of meeting your triggers. You have to intimately know what specific things push you, personally, into that ignition phase before the adrenaline spikes. Let's do a deep dive into these triggers, because this is where the listener can really apply this to their own life.
We can break these down into physical triggers and psychological triggers. Physical triggers are fairly obvious. Someone aggressively pointing a finger an inch from your nose, a loud sudden noise, or an intimidating boss stepping way too close into your personal space. Your body reacts to the physical threat.
But the psychological triggers are the truly insidious ones. They are invisible, but they carry the exact same biological weight. And in the source material, Fisher categorizes these psychological triggers into 3 main buckets. Let's really linger on these.
The first bucket is social evaluation. This is rooted in the primal fear of humiliation or rejection by the tribe. It's that nagging voice wondering if your colleagues think you're smart enough, or if they think you're arrogant, or the deep anxiety of FOMO, fear of missing out.
The underlying psychological theme here is vulnerability. When you feel exposed or judged by the group, your amygdala fires.
The second bucket is personal identity. This happens when there is a direct challenge to the core of who you believe you are as a human being. And this can manifest in a few distinct ways. It could be a challenge to your competence. Imagine an older worker returning to a highly technical workforce and feeling deeply doubted by their younger peers. Any critique of their work feels like a mortal threat.
It could be a challenge to your autonomy, like a veteran, highly skilled nurse suddenly being micromanaged by a fresh out-of-school administrator.
It could be a challenge to your purpose. Picture a high-powered Wall Street executive who suddenly questions if any of their stressful job matters after holding their new baby.
Or it could be a challenge to your value. like sitting in a meeting, hearing an explicit offensive joke and feeling like your personal moral convictions are under attack. The overarching theme for personal identity triggers is adequacy. Am I enough?
And the third major bucket is loss. This is the profound fear of losing a relationship, losing a job, losing money, or losing social status. It's the exact reason you might sit in a boardroom and enthusiastically agree with a terrible, doomed idea from a toxic boss.
Your logical brain knows the idea is bad, but your fear of job loss completely overrides your desire to speak up. The theme here is separation.
So how do you, the listener, actually apply this psychology? You have to reverse engineer your own triggers. Grab a journal tonight and ask yourself, in the last 3 arguments I had, which of those 3 buckets was threatened? Was it my vulnerability, my adequacy, or my fear of separation?
Once you know what triggers you, you develop true emotional discernment. You start to see the matrix. You realize that when your partner is suddenly raising their voice or getting hyper-defensive, it's not necessarily an attack on you. It's just their biology begging to remove a threat. They are triggered.
And as Fisher brilliantly states, what triggers you teaches you. If you can spot the ignition phase happening in yourself or recognize it happening in the other person, you can intervene before that prefrontal cortex shuts down.
Which perfectly sets us up for the ultimate practical application. How do we control the biology? The calm before the storm. I love the visceral metaphor Fisher uses here to describe this moment.
The East Texas woods.
Yes. He talks about growing up in the dense, towering pine woods of East Texas. He says that in those thick woods, you can't see a massive rainstorm coming on the horizon. But you can feel it long before the rain hits. The barometric pressure drops, the temperature suddenly cools, the leaves start to rustle with a weird energy, the air itself feels electrified.
There is this heavy, charged silence right before the sky rips open.
Human arguments have that exact same charged silence right before they ignite. You can feel the barometric pressure drop in the room. A pause lingers just a second too long.
Yeah.
A tone subtly, sharply shifts. A jaw clenches. You feel yourself, or the other person, teetering right on the edge of the cliff.
But our instinct in that electrified second is completely wrong. We use that split second to frantically plan our attack, to search our memory banks for a witty comeback, to cross our arms and brace for impact.
Instead, you need to use that charged silence to control your own biology. This is where Fisher introduces the functional thinking approach. Think of it like baking. It's a strict recipe. You put specific ingredients in, and you get a specific, predictable cake out.
If you input these 3 specific tools in that split second, you output emotional control and genuine connection. Let's give them the recipe. Tool number 1. Your first word is your breath, also known as the conversational breath.
To see this in action, let me tell the story of Elizabeth's deposition. Elizabeth was Fisher's client, and she was facing a notorious, aggressive bully of an opposing lawyer. His entire strategy was psychological warfare.
He was trying to get under her skin, speaking incredibly fast, rapid-firing questions, trying to forcefully push her into her ignition phase so she would make a mistake.
Yes or no? You had the time. Did you look at the clock? Yes or no? He's pressing her, trying to make her freeze up. But instead of rushing her answers to match his frantic pace, she deployed the tool. Before every single answer, no matter how much he badgered her, she took a slow, deliberate breath.
She wasn't just sighing, she was using a very specific technique, one grounded in hard physiology.
Yes. Let's walk the listener through it. Right now, if you're listening in your car or doing the dishes or walking the dog, try this with me. You breathe in slowly through the nose for 2 solid seconds. Then at the top, you take a quick, sharp 1-second top-up inhale. Then you exhale slowly through the nose for 6 full seconds.
And we aren't just making this up. This exact breathing pattern is backed by a 2023 Stanford neurobiology study on what is called the physiological sigh. The researchers found it is one of the fastest, most effective ways to lower autonomic arousal in real time.
It's incredibly similar to the tactical breathing or box breathing used by Navy SEALs. In high-stress, life-or-death combat situations, special operators use rhythmic breathing to manually lower their heart rate so they can maintain their fine motor skills and keep their prefrontal cortex engaged.
Let's explain why it works mechanically. Breathing through your nose instead of your mouth causes more air resistance, naturally slowing your breath down. That double inhale, the quick top-up, forces the tiny air sacs in your lungs, the alveoli, to fully inflate, maximizing oxygen intake.
And that long 6-second exhale is the magic part. It expels massive amounts of carbon dioxide and signals the vagus nerve to lower your blood pressure. When Elizabeth did this in the deposition room, she completely deflated the bullying lawyer.
She took that breath, her shoulders visibly dropped, and she calmly said, "No." He was totally disarmed. He didn't know what to do with her calm energy. She took back the entire control of the room just by breathing.
It's biological hacking. Which brings us to tool number 2. Your first thought is a quick scan.
This tool comes from Fisher's very first yoga class in law school. He admits he thought it was totally silly at first, all the dim lighting, the humming, the meditating. He was a stressed-out law student. He didn't have time for this.
But the instructor told him to lie down and do a body scan. Fisher closed his eyes and suddenly realized his jaw was practically locked shut. His shoulders were height all the way up around his ears, and his breathing was incredibly shallow. He was physically hoarding all this stress and anger, and he didn't even know it.
This is about building what psychologists call somatic awareness, the ability to recognize where your specific body stores tension. For some people, it's a tight chest. For others, it's a knot in the stomach or clenched fists.
The technique here has 4 quick steps you can do in 2 seconds. Step 1, breathe. Pull the air deep from your belly button, not your shallow chest. Step 2, close your eyes. Obviously, don't go to sleep if you're talking to your boss. Just take a slow, deliberate 1 to 2 second blink.
Step 3, examine. Mentally scan your body from head to toe for tension during the exhale and consciously release the muscle. Step 4, label the emotion in your head. Give the ghost a name. Are you actually feeling angry? Or are you feeling pressured, embarrassed, afraid?
And here is the genius listener application for this.
Yeah.
You translate this internal silent scan into the external conversation by using "I can tell" statements. You claim the emotion out loud to rob it its power.
This is so good. Instead of bottling up the frustration until you explode and say something you regret, you pause and say out loud to the person, "I can tell I'm feeling really pressured right now. I need a little time to process this."
Or, "I can tell I'm getting frustrated because I'm tired. I need a 10-minute timeout." Or, "I can tell I'm feeling overwhelmed by all these details. Can we slow down and take this step by step?" It takes the defensive mystery out of what's happening. It injects radical honesty into the room.
It is incredibly disarming when someone names their own negative emotion calmly. It de-escalates the tension immediately because it shows vulnerability, not aggression. Which leads us to the final piece of the recipe, tool number 3. Your first conversation is a small talk.
Fisher talks about his very first trial as a young green lawyer. He was going up against an older, highly experienced opposing counsel, and he was deeply intimidated. Because of his nerves, he was rushing his words, stumbling over objections, making sloppy mistakes.
Driving home that night, beating himself up, he started talking to himself out loud in the car, formulating these little personal mantras. He called them small talks, short, grounding phrases.
Things like, "You be Jefferson," or "Wait for the right pitch." The next morning, he wrote those phrases at the very top of his yellow legal pad, and having those tiny conversations with himself changed his entire demeanor in the courtroom.
There is profound neuroscience at play here. The language we use internally literally shapes our external reality. The concept of neuroplasticity shows that our self-talk physically alters our brain states.
Every time you repeat a calming small talk mantra, you are carving a new, thicker neural pathway in your brain, making it easier for your mind to default to calm rather than panic. Having a pre-planned small talk sets your psychological mindset before the external conversation even begins. It anchors you back to your lighthouse values.
So as you head into your next conversation, whether it's asking for a raise, confronting a friend, or just trying to get a toddler to go to sleep, you have these tools in your back pocket. Take that slow, physiological conversational breath. Do a quick 2-second blink scan of your body and label the emotion. Anchor yourself with your internal small talk.
So let's tie all of these threads together. What does this mountain of insight mean for you, the listener, moving forward?
It means you are now thoroughly equipped to walk into your very next difficult conversation with a completely new identity. You are no longer a gladiator stepping into an arena looking to win a bloody victory. You are an explorer stepping into an unknown world looking for connection.
Remember, you don't need to win the argument. You just need to see the iceberg beneath the surface. Set realistic goals focused on learning, not conquering. Rely on the lighthouse values you established. Recognize when your body's flooding with adrenaline and entering the ignition phase.
And use that charged silence, that terrifying calm before the storm, to take a breath, do a scan, and take control of your biology.
And as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to address you directly, the listener, and leave you with a final lingering idea. It builds on everything we've unpacked today about human nature.
We spend our entire lives stockpiling words. We practice sharp comebacks in the shower. We build ironclad, bulletproof arguments in our minds. We are absolutely terrified of being caught empty-handed and vulnerable in a conflict.
But what if the ultimate conversational power, move the most disarming, connection-building, deeply human thing you could possibly do in your very next heated moment, isn't a word at all? What if it's having the profound, quiet courage to just stand in the storm, take a slow breath, and simply listen to the silence?
Wow, that is exactly what it's all about. Finding the incredible power in the pause.
Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive into the next conversation. We hope you take these real-world tools, test them out, and use them to build bridges or stand as lighthouses in your very next conversation. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.